Welcome into Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Casey Phillips and Scott Smith here. Another beautiful morning for football. I just love getting to say that every morning.
You say that every day.
Every day, and that's what I love about here. I love about Florida, and I love about football. It's just so great to be out here seeing practice happening again, and so glad that you guys are here joining us. We are going to try to give you, of course, as many shots of practice as we can to make up for the fact that there are no fans out here, and we'll be taking your questions. So if you want to submit some of those, make sure you do that on YouTube or Facebook. We're going to submit those in the final segment of the show. That's when we'll get to those. We have a couple bits of news we'll start out with, but today we're going to talk about what we're going to call standouts and something to prove. We've a lot of these shows we've gone through maybe a whole position group or a side of the ball or something like that, but we realized so much about camp that's really fun is to watch guys improve their stock, try to earn those spots, the people that camp can make a difference in what we thought about them maybe, and guys that have really used camp to their advantage, and then guys that maybe still have some time here to try to do that inside of camp. So we're going to talk about those guys that have done that. And but now to start out with, before we get to that, we know that we can finally now announce the signing of AQ Shipley. So tell us a little bit about that and why we haven't announced it in the last 3 or 4 days since the news came out.
I think everybody who's been paying attention knows how this goes now. Once the guy has visited here and it's clear that the team wants to sign him, then it gets reported by outside sources, which they should do. Mm-hmm. They find out that information, they should. But that player has to go through the 72-hour round of COVID testing before he can come into the building, and that's when he actually signs, which happened just this morning right before training camp. And so that's why you're going to see a lot of that this year, and it's just something we have to live with. But AQ Shipley obviously is a guy that Bruce Arians trusts, an experienced guy with a whole ton of starts. In fact, over the last 4 years, he was out due to injury in 2018, but in the other 3 years, he started every game. So that's 48 starts, including all 16 last year for the Cardinals, and a lot of experience in Bruce Arians' offense when he was the head coach there. And that is added to a interior line group that basically had no regular season NFL experience combined amongst all 6 guys. So it's pretty clear that was a spot, and I've talked about it several times, where they could use an experienced veteran, and this is a guy clearly that Bruce Arians he said so. He trusts him. He's a good player. He knows he can step right in. It's kind of similar to signing Earl Watford last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then we also got a chance to hear from special teams coordinator Keith Armstrong yesterday and his media availability. That's something we've talked a lot about recently, how much special teams can occasionally get overlooked, in terms of the importance of what's going on at camp. Everybody's always asking us about, wide receivers and, all those people and just how people are looking in those position groups and in 11 on 11 and things like that. But special teams can really be the deciding factor for a lot, whether it's the return game, kicking battle, how backups are going to solidify their spot on a roster. And so now that you've gotten to hear from Keith Armstrong, what did you feel like you learned?
Well, in an overall sense, one of the things that Coach Arians has said repeatedly is that probably the hardest part of this sort of compressed training camp with no preseason games is evaluating special teams. Usually you find a number of young players who make the roster for that reason and become a core part of what you're doing on special teams. That's a lot harder to do this year. They're going to get some live reps tomorrow in that inter-squad scrimmage, and I think that will be interesting. In fact, Keith Armstrong, as an example, somebody asked him about Parnell Motley, who's been one of the big stories of camp on defense, but as Bruce Arians has made clear, that guy has to play on special teams too, or he's not going to get a shot to play on Sundays. So they need to find out if Parnell can do that. And Keith said they're going to give him the very first rep at gunner in that game. So we talked to him on Salty Dogs, by the way, to listen to that if you want to hear more about what he thinks about those things. So yeah. That's a big thing from Keith, but there was stuff about the kickers and the returners as well.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about how, in particular, the kicker battle has been shaping out according to Keith Armstrong.
Well, he said it's close, and then he said it's real close. And Coach Arians has made it clear that it is a battle, and the winner is going to be the guy that shows the most consistency. And there's no preseason games, that we say for the umpteenth time, for them to prove themselves in a real game atmosphere. So consistency out here matters. Consistency in the inter-squad game matters. So he's looking for, your incumbent is Matt Gay, obviously, and generally if you're a team that drafted a guy, he had a rookie season that was for the most part good until a little slump at the end. You're probably hoping that guy maintains his job and lasts here for a very long time. So I'm not saying you should root for Matt Gay over Elliott Fry or anything, but that's what a team would want the outcome to be, right? But Matt apparently needs to be more consistent out here to coach's liking. So that's something that I'm sure he'll be working on in the days to come.
Yeah, and I know with the return thing, this is pretty great. If people haven't seen, they put up a couple photos after practice where Scotty Miller and Mickens were doing a competition of trying to catch as many of the, as they could as, and I've loved.
It's a common camp
watching
thing.
a common thing at camp for guys that are return guys to really show how good their hands are and how good they are at catching. Both of them apparently were able to secure 7.
That's amazing. So they're holding on 6 and catch a 7.
Holding on to 6 and catching.
Yeah, they're sticking
7.
it between their knees
between the knees and all the arms and still catching it. Which again, I think if we, it is so underrated how hard it is to catch one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Much less 7. So I really enjoyed that. But what did he mention about the names and the people that are being considered for those different return jobs?
Yeah, the quarterbacks came along, so the poor punters and kickers had to leave the field because they're second-class citizens. But right before that, the kicker, Bradley Pinion was punting, and Jaden Mickens was just down here getting some extra work fielding the kicks. And when Keith Armstrong was asked about potential punt returners, he talked about how Justin Watson has done it for him, how Cyril Grayson might have a shot, how Antoine Winfield did it in college. But the name he said first and then went back to at the end is Jaden Mickens, who's a guy who's returned a number of punts over a couple years for the Jaguars. And one of the things Keith Armstrong said a couple times during his talk yesterday was that with less time for young guys to prove themselves, there's probably going to be more veterans on special teams and more guys that you already know you can trust. And in this case, you need to trust that the guy's going to catch the ball regularly, and Jaden Mickens has proved that he could do so.
Okay, so now shifting into what we're going to talk about the rest of the show today, the idea of the standouts versus the something to prove guys in camp. So why don't we go and start with the standouts, guys that have been able to take this camp and use it to their advantage and make a bit of a name for themselves.
Yeah, and this idea was yours, and it's a good one, but I want to make it clear that when we say standouts, I'm not saying these are the best players on the team or the best players in camp. You'll see, for instance, I have Anthony Nelson on there, but not Shaq Barrett. So am I saying Anthony Nelson's doing better than Shaq Barrett? No, I'm not. I'm just saying we already know what we have in Shaq Barrett. Anthony Nelson is that guy that you need to step up and be the third guy in your OLB rotation with Carl Nassib gone. And he was one of the first guys in this whole camp to start getting that buzz. And that's what we're talking about, guys. Guys who have created, for the most part, these are guys who have created more buzz than you saw coming when training camp opened. And when we get to something to prove, we're not saying those guys are having bad camps. We're saying there's an obstacle in their way, or coach wants to see a certain something out of them, and they have a chance to do that in the next couple weeks. But yeah, looking at here, in addition to Anthony Nelson, you see O.J. Howard there because several people, including the coaches, have raved about how well he's doing, and the working him in with Rob Gronkowski, it has not been a hindrance for him. It's actually seemed to have made him better and made that whole unit better. You saw Raheem Nunez-Roches, Nacho. We were talking about him yesterday, how he's really stepped up. Probably one of the most raved about guys in all of camp. You saw Parnell Motley on there. I don't remember all of them. I might need to see the graphic again. But Parnell Motley we were just talking about because he just keeps making interceptions one after another in training camp. I don't know if you saw a name on there you wanted me to get to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that,
go.
Here's the graphic again. But yeah, I think we talked a little bit about Raheem Nunez-Roches yesterday. I think the Justin Watson one is really interesting to me just because of the fact that we saw sort of towards the end of the year last year when he did step in that he just hadn't really gotten much of a chance at his rookie year. He was hurt. He'd done a lot on special teams, but just hadn't really gotten to be a wide receiver in his first couple years here, and stepping in and doing pretty well for Mike Evans, Chris Godwin when they were out.
Yeah.
And wondering, was that just, that point in the year, and was it going to carry over? And I think it's been interesting to see that. I think that there was a lot of talk that he would be making the team mainly on a special teams role if he did. And now the way that Coach was talking, I mean, that was like the first name out of Coach Arians' mouth when he was asked, but that third wide receiver spot. I don't think that's what a lot of people would have expected necessarily before this camp.
Yeah, and if you listen to Justin Watson, I think it was yesterday, you can give a little bit of that credit to Anthony Paroli, our strength coach, because he came to him at the end of last season and he showed him a bunch of metrics and things about weights and size and speed and so on. And he said, I think if you get to this, you will be faster and you will be a better receiver. And so Justin Watson took that to heart. He says he was playing at about 218 last year, and he intends to play at about 210 this year. And he is faster.
Yeah.
He really, literally, I remember that one day he had the fastest clock time on the field at like 21 miles per hour. I mean, when Mike Evans hit 21 one day, he was thrilled, right?
Yeah.
He thought that was a great accomplishment. So think about that. Justin Watson is literally faster than he was last year. And then Coach Arians says he's making a lot more grimy catches. So catches in traffic, catches where it's a little bit behind you. And you need to be able to make those to be a standout receiver.
Right.
And that wasn't something that was a big part of his game, even when he was kind of doing better last year. So if he can make more of those type of plays and he's faster, now you can see, like you said, why all of a sudden he's in the mix and why he's on the field.
And the speed part is really interesting because we always rave about Scotty Miller's speed. But if you look back, I think, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I want to say their pro day 40 times, Scotty's was like a 4.3 and Justin's was a 4.4.
Interesting.
That was back in their pro day. So now if Justin is faster.
Yeah, closing the gap.
And I mean, that's incredible because, again, guys just rave about how fast Scotty Miller is.
Yeah, somebody called him the fastest guy on the team the other day.
And so I think that's sort of an interesting thing to me to see is, I mean, it's not like we're going to get them to go retime a 40. That's not going to happen. But it is sort of an interesting thought of how much has that gap closed and what does that mean, considering especially how big Justin Watson is.
And then I kind of snuck a name in on there that kind of goes against the whole, hey, I'm not just putting the big names. You might have seen I had Tom Brady on that list.
Yeah, I noticed that one. You really went for the, the unsung hero there.
I really pulled one from
from deep.
Hat there, right? But I just thought it was worth pointing out that every single time somebody's been asked about him, they've been raving about him, how he's doing out here in camp, sometimes for different reasons. Like Todd Bowles talking about how he makes sure his incompletions are incompletions and not interceptions, and defensive backs talking about how he moves them around with their eyes and how he reads their disguises right away and knows exactly what they're doing. And Cam Bray was joking about how he ran a touchdown in the other day in goal line situation, and and it's always a little bit contested whether or not that's going to be a touchdown because you're not going to hit the quarterback. But Cam thought he got in. So from his attitude to his leadership to the way he's making guys be sharp on the details to running backs learning how to run routes better for him, all kinds of tiny little details adding up to Tom Brady having a fantastic camp. And he's 43 years old. Not a lot of guys have done that at this age, but he's a different kind of cat.
Yes, he is. That is for sure. Well, speaking of guys that are standing out, this is a perfect time for us to check out the Frontier play of the day from yesterday's practice. There you go. So Blaine Gabbert got some reps because it was another one of those veteran days off for a couple guys
and that was
yesterday.
Mickens on the other end.
And that was Mixon's right there. So I figured that worked out really well. But I noticed, Blaine Gabbert wasn't someone that we had on the standouts list, but I do think that, to me, he's someone that has improved his stock here, and just maybe even not that he's done anything different, but that what we have learned, because I think we all kind of wondered, he was out last year, him versus Griff for that, main backup spot. But from what Coach Arians has said, it sounds like, I think the words he used were that he was pretty entrenched in that backup spot. So to me, that's definitely an area that we have gotten some clarity on potentially that we didn't have at the beginning of camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And he has looked good, so he could have been on that list. But yeah, you pulled out the right quote. He made it pretty clear that that's your number two. Right. The real question there is how many you're going to keep on the active roster. And if you don't, are you going to put one or more of them on the practice squad? And are you going to try to keep them separate from your other quarterbacks in case there's a COVID situation?
Man, that's a lot of questions just with that one position of how they're going to handle it. All right, well, we are going to take a quick break here. We're going to get a chance to do another Meet the Rookie, Antoine Winfield Jr., and then we'll be back after that.
You got to do it on that side. Never drop the ball. You can't touch the ball yet.
Football became a part of my life ever since I was a young kid. I feel like the earliest I can remember is being 2 years old, playing football with my dad. My dad played in the NFL for 14 years, so I feel like he's the one that put the ball in my hands at an early age. So I've been playing ever since I could really walk. A lot of people always ask me if there was ever any pressure to play football, living up to my dad's name, but there was never any at all. At an early age, he told me that I didn't have to play football if I didn't want to, but I play the sport because I love playing it.
He'll throw. End zone for the win! And it's intercepted! And Minnesota wins it!
Favorite part of the game is creating takeaways for our team, giving our offenses more opportunities to score the ball, ultimately results in wins for the team. So being able to create takeaways is probably my favorite aspect of the sport. My mentality is that anything is possible as long as you're willing and able to put the work in throughout the week. And I would say, like, starting on Monday, we would come in, we start our first install, and then, we go watch film, go to practice. One thing I would do is always come after practice and catch 25 balls in the jug, just to get my hands right. I do that throughout the entire week. At the end of the day, you come in with that mentality that you're going to work hard and, that you're going to get results at the end of the day. Biggest goal this year is to be the defensive rookie of the year. That's my goal. Getting there, learning all the plays, and eventually earning a starting role. So, it's little steps along the way, but long-term goal, I want to be defensive rookie of the year and a Super Bowl champion.
We're going to go one high seam. You're in the slot.
Tom's arrival means two things. You're never too old to be the new guy, and class is now in session.
A lot of it comes to confidence as a player and your ability to know what to do and know how to do it. I think when you learn a new system, you still don't know all the different things that you want to know about a certain play or scheme.
Brady isn't the only one adjusting. He shares the learning curve with Rob Gronkowski.
Gronk's a confident player, so am I. But you also, I think part of being a quarterback is you can't really yell at anyone if you're the one screwing up. So I don't like to screw up, but I also learning things for the first time. So I do screw up, which is a very frustrating thing for me. And I think Gronk is very similar to that. He was in one place where he knew everything. Now you come to a different place and you don't know anything. So you still got to find ways to make the right plays.
Good route.
He's very detailed. He's very persistent. If he misses a throw, he wants to hit that throw a couple times after that.
Really good, Cam. Nice job.
If he misses something at all, he wants to do it over and get it right. His preparation is unbelievable, and his work ethic is crazy.
Just like that. Just like that.
If he has a question, he's got Cam, he's got OJ, he's got Chris, Mike to ask. And now this is how we teach it. This is what we're doing. This is what they meant. And then he'll say, I don't like that route that way. Take it one step shorter.
Nope. Nice. Can't stop that. Can't stop that route. We do it right, they can't stop that.
They just give me so much confidence that I know that if I just give them the opportunity to make the play, that they're going to make it.
That's really good, guys. Really good. Really good. Really good. Good job.
Welcome back into Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Casey Phillips and Scott Smith here with you. And again, just a reminder, in our next segment, we'll be taking your questions. So submit those on YouTube or Facebook. And you're taking a look at some of the work the quarterbacks are doing. And I loved it during that break. I looked over and, they have those green exercise balls you can see sitting there by the tackling dummies that they're rolling at the quarterbacks to make them be moving around them and moving their feet. And at one point, Brady practically jumped over one while making this beautiful throw.
Yeah.
And it was pretty incredible. And my other favorite part of this is that they have Antoine Winfield is actually helping by taking some of those passes. And, we've heard so much about Brady's leadership and how encouraging and, enthusiastic and vocal he is. And even when this wasn't a pass he threw, but Antoine Winfield made a good grab from one of the other quarterbacks or something. And Brady's like, that away, L, good catch, L. And I love that it extends even to guys that are no longer playing, that are the coaches on the team, that he has still got that same attitude about it.
Yeah, those that drill with them rolling the balls on them as they drop back and them having to dodge them like they're pass rushers. I think one of the main things there is that in a lot of cases, they aren't able to step into their throws. They have to make throws from different from awkward positions, and to see how they can do that and how well they can do that, because you want to step into every throw, but you can't always step into your throws.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so last segment we talked about the standouts of camp, guys that have already done some things to maybe improve their stock or just to make us take notice of them during training camp. So this time we thought we'd talk about the something to prove, and I'll go ahead and let you give the disclaimer again about what that means, and the same way you did for the first segment.
Yeah, and first of all, I think it's a good thing that the Meet the Rookie package today was on Antoine Winfield Jr. because he's the only one from our standouts list that I didn't get a chance to mention, but he's gotten a lot of praise, and he's a guy that's really helping himself in that safety battle. But these something to prove guys, again, these are not guys having bad camps. by any stretch of the imagination. So, and you'll see as we go through this what I mean. Some of them have obstacles. Some of them have little things they need to clean up or certain things they need to prove to the coaches. And we already talked about Matt Gay. What his thing that he needs to prove from here on out is that he's going to be consistent from day to day and from kick to kick. And both Bruce and Keith Armstrong said, yeah, he makes that 45-yarder, then 2 minutes later he has to make the 30-yarder, and so on. So that's why I have him on this list. Keyshawn Vaughn had the obstacle of, he got a slow start, and he's a rookie, so he hasn't had any preseason games, off-season practices, and then he was on that reserve list for a little while, so he got held back a little bit. And same thing for rookie Tyler Johnson, who I think when drafted, we all kind of hoped he'd be right there in the mix for that third receiver role. It's probably not going to happen at the start of the season because he's missed so much time due to injury. So that's why he's on that list. There's a couple others there. I think we're going to need to look at the graphic again, but I don't know.
Yeah, how about Vita Vea? Why would he be on there when we've heard some pretty good things about him?
Well, yeah, I did. There was definitely one day where Coach said that Vita was having a good camp, but then there was another day where he's asked about him. He said, well, that club on his hand is holding him back a little bit. It can be a little bit frustrating because you can't use both hands, obviously. And also that's something to prove thing, that element of it, because what they want out of him this year is more of a pass rush. And, Todd Bowles says it's about his hand placement, and Bruce Arians says he's got nimble feet, and with that bulk, he should be a good pass rusher. And Vita himself says it has to do with watching a lot of film and picking up what moves he should be improving on and how to beat certain guys. So that's what I mean for having him on that list there. I don't remember all the names on the list, so we might need to see it again in order to go
I know Ronald Jones was another one that you had on
Yeah,
there.
now Ronald Jones looks great as a runner. He's really sharp, and he's already been anointed as the main guy in the backfield. But if he wants to play all 3 downs, he's got to catch the ball. And he probably has on most days, but there's been a couple days where the coach has talked about several of the running backs, including Ronald, having a couple drops, and they just want him to be more consistent with his hands. And he really was quite good in the passing game last year. I have Alex Kapp on this list, not really specifically because of Alex. I just wanted to pick somebody that to represent the entire offensive line, and other than the rookie Tristan Wirfs, he's the one with the least experience. The whole offensive line really wants to be better at running the football this year, Ali Marpet was talking about that a couple days ago. That's their real point of emphasis, is running the football better. And we had a live goal line period the other day, and Bruce Arians wasn't particularly happy with the offensive running game, and so that's what I mean for something to prove with those guys. And then the last guy I think on that list that I haven't mentioned yet is Jaden Mickens, and really that underscores what I mean, that these guys aren't having bad camps. You look at Jaden Mickens, he was actually released along with Spencer Schnell, who's also back, right before the start of camp, and it was just a numbers thing. We had a few more receivers than we needed, and we had to get down to 80. And he came back, and so did Spencer after a couple guys got hurt. Now, so he was one of the last guys cut on the receiving corps before camp, which would tend to indicate that he was near the bottom of the totem pole there. Now he comes back, and due to injuries, the punt return job is wide open, and now all of a sudden he's got a very clear path to possibly making the 53, but obviously he has to prove that he's worthy of that job.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I know you mentioned the run game, and with Ronald Jones being on that end, just talking about the offensive line, what are the areas that you feel like just will need to improve the most with that this year? Is it even the idea of, we talked about like tight ends being able to block as well, and how that looked in 12 personnel, the offensive line, what they've been doing, the actual running backs and what they've been doing. I know it all works together, but where are the areas that you feel like could really stand for some improvement?
Yeah, definitely the tight end should help. Adding Rob Gronkowski should help, and O.J. Howard is really putting a lot of emphasis on his own run blocking. So if both of those guys are good run blockers, then your 12 personnel running play should be better, because they were not very good last year. Our per carry average out of that package was not very good, and it should be better. That'll help. But I think when you hear Ali Marpet talk about how the line, their emphasis is to do better, that must, if you go a little deeper, that obviously must be in terms of, I mean, we know these guys are strong and powerful and can move guys, right? Mm-hmm. But they need to, dominate more from snap to snap, and they probably just need to get their blocking schemes down as a whole unit better, right? I mean, those are the things that'll make the running game better.
Yeah, that's true. And with the addition of A.Q. Shipley, how does that maybe just shake up in general who could be making this roster, and especially all those backup roles, and how those different rotations could look? And again, we always talk about the 53 versus who's actually active on game day, and that it's not always just your best offensive linemen per se that are going to be active, that you got to think about the whole backup of interior, exterior, who can play what roles, and if somebody has a lot of diversity in their experience, that can maybe make them have a higher likelihood of being active on game day.
Yeah, it's not like we pulled AQ Shipley off. He's a 35-year-old veteran. We pulled him off mothballs. This guy started all 16 games last year and basically has been a full-time starter for the past 4 years. So you got to believe he's coming in here ready to go. And if he is, that makes me think he's a pretty good candidate to make the 53-man roster. So there's probably one less spot for a young guy like Zach Bailey or John Molchon or somebody.
Zach Shackelford.
Zach Shackelford. Yeah. Or Anthony Fabiano. That's one less spot for them probably. It would be more likely one of those guys would end up on the practice squad than the active roster. Yes, I think what Bruce wants there is just the guy that he knows he can plug in if he has to. Same thing with signing Joe Haig. So if Tristan Wirfs, for some reason, they don't feel comfortable putting him out there in week 1, they know they can count on Joe Haig. And I don't think AQ Shipley's had a ton of moving around in his career. He's basically been a center, but I would imagine most centers can play guard if asked to do so.
Okay. All right. Well, we still have one more segment coming up here on Training Camp Live presented by Publix, and we're going to be taking your questions. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you submit those on YouTube or Facebook. And for now, take a look at our shots of the day.
Our theory is that he tried to line it up, messed up, so he had to say what the whole thing.
Welcome back into Training Camp Live presented by Publix. Time for our final segment here, which is where we get to your questions. Again, you can submit those on YouTube or Facebook. So our first one, Joe had asked how much live tackling is going on during training camp this year.
Yeah, it's still not a huge amount because coaches understand the double-edged sword they have there, and they understand that every live period is something of a risk. So it's a matter of risk-reward. You're taking a risk of injuring some of your own guys, but you really need to find out who can hit and who can tackle and who can break tackles and so on. And you need to be ready for getting hit on September 13th. That can't be the first time they take a hit or try to make a tackle. I don't know if I could say a percentage of how much there is, but there's more than there has been in previous camps. Usually for days ahead when a live period's coming, and it's often just like one live goal line period. Nowadays, when you watch practice, you go, oh, they're going live in this one. They kind of surprise you with the period where all of a sudden everybody's going to the ground. So more, but I don't have an exact percentage.
Okay, and our next question was, how have the screen passes to running backs been looking?
I saw a really nice one to Ray Calais the other day. The screen, somebody was talking about that during the Zoom calls yesterday, and they said the screen game could be a bigger part of what we do. Don't really want to get too much into the specifics of that because now we're talking about game planning and strategy, and that's something where all teams are kind of prohibiting. Right. So I don't think we can get too much into that, but we got a couple guys that are obviously pretty good at that, including LaShawn McCoy.
Okay, and another question was, which safety is looking like the leader of the group, and do you think by the end of the year it could be Winfield?
That would be a big jump for the rookie to end the season as the leader of the field. That would have to mean he wins a starting job and is just making so many plays that he sort of becomes like the emotional leader of that group. But I would think the obvious choice is Jordan Whitehead. He's the closest. He's the only real incumbent we have there. He's a guy who started most of the last 2 seasons when he's been healthy. And I think he's still a very young guy, but I think it has to be him at this point. Now, if you talk to them, they talk about how Andrew Adams is their veteran, their calming veteran presence in the meeting room. So you could maybe put him in the mix as well. But I don't know if Andrew Adams is going to end up as a starter right out of camp. So I think your leader is probably somebody that's going to be on the field more often.
Yeah, that's a great point. We also had another question about how when we will probably have a better idea for how Tristan Wirfs is doing and how he will be looking when we could have without preseason games to kind of get a chance to watch from
September
when we
13th,
might.
when Cameron Jordan's right there in his face. That's when you're going to know, because you really can't simulate it even in these inter-squad games. I mean, you can to some extent. You can simulate him having to go up against a guy like that because he's going against Shaq and JPP. So I guess there is that. But, given the restrictions on what we can show and what we can report, all we can go on is what people are saying about him. And Coach has said he's right on target. And Ali Marpet was really giving him a lot of kudos and said he's where he needs to be. So we can just go on what those guys are saying at this point.
Mike had asked, do you think that Winston has an advantage to being able to share with New Orleans things that the Bucs like to do?
But that thing is, if you ask any coach or any player, that thing has always been overrated. That concept of we got one of their guys, so now he's gonna unlock all the secrets for us. They have film. The Saints have been watching film of the Buccaneers probably all off season. They did last year and the year before that and the year before that. They can see what we do, And Jameis hasn't been here to see any of the new stuff that they're putting in or the tendencies now that you have Tom Brady, what they want to run more often. I think that's always an overrated idea, but it's particularly overrated in this case. I don't think it makes that much difference at all.
Okay, and we sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, but Vincent asked, how do you see the run game complementing the pass this season? So overall, just how much, we always hear about balance, the idea of how balanced is your offense of run versus pass, and what are you trying to do there? And I know a lot of that ends up being dictated by what happens in the game of, do you get down early or not? Are you playing with the lead or playing from behind? But in an ideal world, what do you feel like this offense could look like, run versus pass, and how aggressive they're going to want it to look?
Yeah, have you seen Tom Brady execute one of his play-action fake handoffs out here? It's the thing of beauty.
Yep.
And he's always been considered a guy who's very, very good at that. Some quarterbacks are better at it than others. Some of them come out with an empty hand that they're holding in the running back's stomach, but Tom, like some of them, he'll hold the ball there to the last minute, so the fake is really a lot more believable. So you obviously want Tom to have an effective situation for play-action passing. There's some disagreement between experts of how much it matters how strong your running game is to the effectiveness of play-action, but I think most coaches believe that if their running game is going well, that's really going to make the play-action have a lot more bite to it. So that's part of it. And then the other thing is kind of, you alluded to it, if the Buccaneers are definitely improved from last year, if they're not hurting themselves as much with turnovers and penalties and so on, and giving the other team opportunity to score a lot of points, if they're not falling into early deficits and they actually have some leads in the second half and especially in the fourth quarter, then they'll be able to run the ball more. Do you know how many running plays Ronald Jones got last year when his team was leading with less than 4 minutes to go in the game?
How many?
2.
Oh, God.
2.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
He averaged just over 2 fourth quarter carries per game during the season. That's not what you want. So
No.
Ronald Jones will get an opportunity to get more if the Buccaneers can get some fourth quarter leads and they're trying to grind down that clock with the running game.
Yeah, that's going to make a huge difference for there. Well, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Training Camp Live, presented by Publix. Thanks as always for being with us. We enjoy those questions. We're glad you guys get to be here with us, even though not in person, at least getting to share in this experience with us. We will be back tomorrow, and it is actually going to be their mock scrimmage game at the stadium. We still are not exactly sure what all we're going to be able to show you guys yet, but again, of course, I know everybody's on the same team here of wanting to make sure that they hide any secretive information they don't want out there. So we're going to show you as much as we can. So make sure you come back tomorrow morning to be part of our live show that will be happening from Raymond James Stadium. We'll see you then.